In 1425, a 13-year-old peasant girl stood alone in a field. Suddenly, a blinding light split the sky open, and several figures wearing armor stepped out. They told her to take up arms, lead France's armies, and drive out the English. And somehow, against all odds, she did it. She won battles that no one thought were possible. The church called her visions divine, and in 1920, she was made a saint. That girl was Joan of Arc. But I want you to take a moment to think about the facts of this story. A teenager is visited by glowing beings from the sky and is handed a mission that reshapes Europe. This isn't folklore. This isn't a myth. This is a historical story as recorded by the Vatican in their own archives. And Joan of Arc's story is not alone. There are other stories just like this, hidden in those same archives. Encounters that sound less like history and more like contact. And that's what we're doing today. We're going to walk through some of the strangest cases the Vatican has ever recorded. Are these stories proof of heaven breaking into history, or evidence of another kind of presence we still don't understand? To start our investigation, I spoke to Catholic historian and UFO researcher Diana Pasulka about the moment that she made the same exact connection.
So you don't have to make extraordinary claims. All you have to do is take two very compelling cases that look alike and do some comparison. One of the first ones I looked at was Teresa of Avila. She's a Spanish nun, and in the 1500s. So she is at the convent, and she is very confused because down to her side is a little being. And this being, probably about 3 feet tall, is shiny. So she says it's like it's on fire, but it's actually not on fire, but it's really shiny. And she said, I think it's an angel, but I'm not sure. So she's confused about what it is. Is it an angel? And she said, if it is an angel, it's the little type of angel, right? So she just calls it a cherub because she doesn't know how to categorize it as, it doesn't look like the normal angels that she sees. She also makes this point. She says, this is physical. I don't see this in my imagination like I normally see angels. And then she says, this angel takes out a dart. And on the end of the instrument, there's like a fire or a light. She says it thrusts it into her entrails. If you're familiar at all with the literature on UFOs, you'll see that John Mack wrote about this type of thing in a book. And he talks about this type of examination that happens to people when they're confronted with these little shiny beings. I sent it to a friend of mine who he actually did his master's degree on Teresa. And I said, have you seen this? And he said, no, you're reading it wrong. And I said, I'm not reading it wrong. I'm reading it literally. And so what I did then was I took that and I compared it to one of John Mack's subjects who he interviewed. And so I went to visit him and his wife. We had a very long interview, and he talked to me about how he felt that it's not an abduction like John Mack said it was, but it's an experience, and that these things are closer to angels than they are to what people think of as little green men. And so she had called it an angel, and this contemporary professor called it an angel. I think we should be careful about what we say about this experience, because people still call these things angels and sometimes demons. They're not using the framework that you see in Close Encounters of the Third Kind. They're not using this X-Files framework to understand their own experience. They're still using a religious framework to understand what is happening to them.
It's important to remember that the Vatican's archives aren't just books on theology and doctrine. They're stacked with eyewitness accounts of strange encounters. They contain scrolls and letters and describe lights that move with intent and beings that glow and objects that lift souls out of bodies. They hold physical evidence for these events and testimony from bishops and saints and even emperors testifying to their legitimacy. And when you hold these stories up against modern alien encounters, the similarities are impossible to ignore. So the question is, are these stories miracles, or are they proof of something else moving through history, hiding in plain sight? Our first story takes us to Constantinople in 438 AD. The city was reeling from famine and plague when a massive earthquake struck. Buildings were crumbling, and the townspeople gathered in front of the emperor and the city's bishop looking for hope. Then, something impossible happened. In the middle of this crowd, a young boy was suddenly lifted into the air by an unseen force. He rose so high that the people below him lost sight of him. Minutes later, he drifted back down completely unharmed. The boy said he had entered a realm of blinding light where beings sang hymns in voices that he couldn't understand. A bishop wrote about the event and said that the whole city saw it with their eyes, and the Pope later confirmed this event in a letter. This wasn't a rumor, everyone had seen it. From peasants in the streets to the emperor himself, they all told the same story. If something like this happened today, it wouldn't be dismissed as folklore. It would be called what it is, a mass sighting event. And this story is just the beginning, because only a century later, another light would split the sky, and this time it carried with it the soul of a saint. In 540 AD, at a monastery in Italy, Saint Benedict was praying next to his window at dawn. Suddenly, the night sky split open, and outside his window, he saw a light that he described as a beam of the sun. And according to Benedict, it took the shape of a fiery globe. Inside that globe, he saw a local bishop being carried into the sky by shining angelic figures. In total shock, he cried out for a deacon who rushed in just in time to see the fading light of the orb. A few days later, Benedict heard news that the bishop that he had seen in that orb had died at the exact same moment as his vision. What makes this account so unusual is how Benedict described it. He didn't call it a dream or a vision within his mind. He insisted that the orb was real. It was a vessel that carried a soul to heaven. The Vatican called it a miracle, but set against modern encounters, it reads like a contact event. This next event is even stranger because it was witnessed by an army and a king at war. What they saw on the battlefield altered history and bound the future of France and Europe itself to the Catholic Church. In 507 AD, Clovis I, king of the Franks, was locked in a battle with the Visigoths, who ruled much of southern Gaul at the time. Clovis was on the edge of defeat. The fate of his entire kingdom hung in the balance. One night, something strange appeared above the city of Poitiers. A flame-like light hovered in the sky. It wasn't a meteor or a star. It didn't streak or vanish. It lingered and moved with slow intent. Everyone in Poitiers saw it, soldiers, clergymen, even peasants. And many compared it to the pillar of fire that once led the Israelites through the wilderness after escaping from Egypt. Seeing this glowing orb as a sign, Clovis readied his troops and followed the pillar of fire into enemy territory. By dawn, the war was over. The Visigoths were crushed, and their king was dead. Clovis had secured the land that would become the nation of France. After his victory, King Clovis converted to Catholicism, and he forged an alliance with the Catholic Church that would shape both Vatican and European history for centuries. Out of the smoke of war, a glowing orb guided a king to victory and secured the future of the church and a nation. The Vatican has preserved these stories for centuries, not as folklore, but as pivotal moments in Christian history. Maybe they're right, and these beings are angels, or maybe there's something else. I personally don't believe they saw visitors from another planet. I think they were experiencing something real, but far stranger. These stories are pieces of a larger story. They are signs of a cosmic struggle between good and evil breaking through into our world. What we call contact is only a modern mask for something far more ancient. a battle of light and darkness playing out above our heads. These stories sound like alien visitations because that's the language of our culture. In truth, they read more like dispatches from a larger war, where every vision, every light in the sky is part of a struggle between powers we can barely comprehend. And if these forces once moved openly in the sky, guiding kings and saints, what does it mean that people still see them today? What do they want from us? If you are new here, my name is Taylor McMahon, and if you want to see my full interview with Diana Pasulka, you can check it out for free on my website, which is linked in the show notes, or you can watch it in my YouTube members only area. I would also highly recommend both of Diana's books, which have informed my thinking on this topic. If you want to see more stories about the lost and forgotten parts of our world, be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications. I'll see you guys in the next one.